Our next presenter for the day is Dr. Kin On Lo, IOP Specialist, SDN BHD, Company Incorporation from Klang, Malaysia. His topic of research is production of oxygen from aqueous water using the principle of induced current, part 2, properties of oxygen and their relationship to Einstein's special relativity theory. His abstract is on the screen.
Yes, I'm present.
Yes, sir. Sir, you may proceed your presentation. You may share your screen.
Good afternoon. My name is Kin On Lo. I'm from Malaysia. Klang. I'm from a company. I'm not from any university, but my research is collaborated with the Tunku Abdul Rahman University in Malaysia. So this is the second part of my research in the water analysis. So the title of today's presentation is the production of oxygen from aqueous water using the principle of induced current. And this is part 2. Part 1, I have already presented in earlier of the year in the same conference. And in this part, I found the properties of oxygen that can produce from aqueous water, which is different from what we taught in the atmosphere. And these properties of oxygen and their relationship to Einstein's special relativity theory is concerned. My name is Lau Kin On. I have a PhD from the University of Manchester, United Kingdom, year 1999. Presently, I'm the Managing Director of IOP Specialist Sandrian Berhad. And I'm also Industry Advisor to 2 universities in Malaysia, which are the University of Malaya and also the Islamic International University of Malaysia. Myself has presently 11 patents granted worldwide, which is from the United States, United Kingdom, China, India, Malaysia, Vietnam, South Africa, and so on, and in other fields, but not in water. So the oxygen can be free off from water, and which was my previous presentation and already published early of this year. In this part 2, I'm concentrating in the properties of the oxygen that can be free off from water. And I found that the oxygen free off from water has higher oxidative power, and in the same time, this oxygen also has higher mass compared to those average in the ambient air. I will present an analytical method to show that this finding is correct. I will also show a hypothetical method where gamma ray phases can be produced so that this oxidative power and higher mass can be interpermutable. I will also show how I test the hypothetical method to show that it is actually happened in experiments, and this test I show in the examples in my future work section. So I found a new process where oxygen can be generated other than the photosynthesis that normally people and scientists believe. in the atmosphere. Means presently I believe oxygen that contained in the atmosphere not just come from the photosynthesis, but oxygen also produced when water is moving and when the principle of induced current to take place. And this was my previous publication and already published in these citations. So the important facts that I discovered in part 2, first is when oxygen is released from water naturally, and it is not a chemical process, but it is a natural process. And when oxygen is released from water naturally, gamma ray flashes will also be produced. So these gamma ray flashes are responsible to modify the properties of oxygen made from aqueous water when compared to those made from photosynthesis. Such modifications obey Einstein's special relativity theory. And these are the possible reasons to explain the atomic mass of some elements is in range and some are not. Means some elements, for example, carbon, nitrogen, they are not fixed. Their atomic mass are not fixed, but they are in range. And most of us, we are not well aware, but we already use this data for many years. However, these elements' atomic mass are actually in range. So I explain what is terrestrial gamma ray flashes. So gamma ray flashes initially discovered by Dwyer and Smith. And Dwyer and Smith, they discovered when cosmic rays and contained in the cosmic rays are mostly protons. When they collide with the thunder clouds, gamma ray flashes can be produced. But Dwyer and Smith and et al., they don't know why when they collide, gamma ray flashes can be produced. They don't know why. Number 2, present day, scientists already detect everywhere gamma ray can be detected in the ambient air. And this is reported by Dogru et al. At 2005 in my citation, meaning that everywhere gamma ray flashes is present and already being detected by scientists in the present day. So scientists commented it relates to the presence of electrons, but the real reasons are not proposed by all scientists. Until today, I make a presentation and I try to comment and to find the real reason gamma ray flashes are present in the ambient air. So now I present some elements with range of atomic mass. So example, oxygen. Oxygen has minimum atomic mass, which is 15.999. And the maximum atomic mass is 15.9997, which is the difference of 0.0007. You can find this data from periodic table very easily. And usually chemists, scientists, and researchers, we do not aware. And we just use the fixed number 16 to do all the calculations for scientific experiment. But today I present this data is useful and the difference in the range is very important for life. Similarly to carbon, the minimum atomic range the minimum atomic weight range at 12.0096 to 12.0116, which is a considerable amount, and many people not aware of the range. Also, hydrogen also in range, and still many other example like lithium, boron, magnesium, silicon, sulfur, chlorine, and etc. What I show in this table, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, and the rest are already the complete elements that having atomic mass in range. Other than these elements, all elements are not in range, they are fixed number, and this is very important to know about it, because these elements, their mass can be modified by the gamma ray phases. So what is principles of induced current? So all the time during the raining day, we will see this picture, thunder cloud with lightning. So when the cloud is moving, and the earth has magnetic field, so when the cloud is moving, when it cuts through the magnetic field, electron will be generated and lightning can occur. So this is the natural process where the principle of induced current can take place. And for thousands of years, people believe all life started when there is water and lightning. But these are just beliefs. People and scientists couldn't find the real reasons why this is like this. So now I want to show the productions of electrons in water, and I name this process as the magnetosynthesis process. So consider I have water, and this water can flow, and it's flow into a container filled with magnetite powder. And this container, when it filled with magnetite powder, it will provide the magnetic field necessary for the water to flow in, cut through the magnetic field, and when it comes out from the container, electron will be generated and it contained in the water. And so I call this water produced from this process is called electron water. And when the water flow in and water flow out one time, I call this as one cycle. And if flow second time, I will call it as two cycle, three cycle, and etc. So consider there is a formation of hydrogen electron pairs, which is important for today's research topic. So water, it is well accepted that water, when it is in the aqueous state, water will dissociate partially to be ion of hydrogen and ion of hydroxyl. And this ion of hydrogen, nowadays, we call this as proton. And it is very important to know that ion of hydrogen is proton. And in the same time, we must also aware that the proton is the nucleus of hydrogen. And this is very important because in the present elements that scientists find out, this is the only nucleus contain only one proton and there is no neutron in its nucleus. So consider that when the water moves into magnetic field, electron will be generated like this. So when electron is generated, and because of the electron is a negatively charged particle, it will be attracted to the positive particle, which is the hydrogen ion or the proton. So when electron attracted to proton, an hydrogen-electron pair is formed. And this concept actually I have already published in previous paper. And now I just want to repeat in a simple form so that all people can understand in the later presentation. So when the hydrogen-electron pair is formed, the OH negative, which is the ion hydroxyl, became excessive. When the ion hydroxyl became excessive, it will then be dissociated according to the principle of Lee-Chatelier. So 4 hydroxyl ion will dissociate to form 2 molecules of water in aqueous state, and 1 molecule of oxygen is then produced with 4 electronic energy. And this equation I already presented in the previous paper. So when I compile this equation with the previous one, I can get an overall equilibrium, and the detailed derivation you can find in my paper, which will be published soon. So the overall equation is, if in the case I have 2 molecules of water, and in the case that the magnetic field can create 4 electrons and all is absorbed by the water. So every 2 molecules of hydrogen water will produce 1 molecule of oxygen and 4 pairs of hydrogen electron. So when we look at this equation, 2 products is now produced. So I can produce oxygen gas, and in the same time I produce hydrogen electron pair. So both of these products has their own function in my research and found it. So now I present how I analyze my data and to give a hypothesis and so on. So initially, from cycle number 0 to cycle number 10, oxygen can be produced, and you can see in the graph, from 4 ppm it increased to about 7 ppm in 10 cycles. And from cycle number 1 to cycle number 10, it was my previous data presented in previous paper. And after this, I found that the properties of the oxygens are different. So I need to study, and then only I study from cycle number 10 to the rest of the cycle. So why I want to study from cycle number 10 to the rest of the cycle? Because I think that when oxygen can be produced and when it close to the saturation point, then exchange of the oxygen produced from water with the oxygen in the ambient air can happen. By this way, I can study the difference between them. And this diagram shows that the oxidative power from cycle number 10 onwards, it will continue to increase. However, up to this point, which is cycle number 11, a steep drop characteristic happens. I show you. So there is 2 steep drop characteristic. I call this as single steep drop characteristics, meaning that from cycle number 11 to cycle number 12, a very sharp drop of oxidative power of the water happened. However, subsequent cycle is so increment. So it contains some information that today I want to analyze for you to study together. So this only happen, the single steep drop characteristic only happen when the water close to saturation. So the results that I get from the experiments shows that the final oxidative power after full magnetosynthesis process, which is about 25 cycles, is 180 millivolt. However, if I place the water just at the atmosphere without going through any magnetosynthesis process, it is 173 millivolt. For long hours, if I expose it to the air, just 173. Hence, I can conclude the oxidative power of the oxygen or the water has the oxidative power higher than those just exposed to the air. So we look at the single steep drop characteristics again for discussions. 这个可以弄走上面没有？ So I draw the single steep drop characteristics in this diagram so that audience can easy to read, watch, and to see it. So consider at the point A, which is about cycle number 11. So at cycle number 11, oxygen was produced at the saturation level, meaning that the water is able to hold the oxygen at that much level only. More than that much area, any newly produced oxygen will be forced to release to the environment, and this is the Henry law. So when the oxygen released to the environment, so when I continue cycle number 12, which is point B, an exchange of oxygen atoms between ambient air and the water happen. So those enter from the atmosphere shows a sharp drop in the oxidative power. ORP means the oxidative reduction potential of the water. So, however, if the oxygen produced by water having the same oxidative power, it will continue to drop. But from point B, C, D, and E, when I move the water to next cycle and next cycle, the oxidative power continue to increase. This shows that when the water achieves equilibrium saturation level, exchange of oxygen between the ambient air and water happen, and those oxygen come from the ambient air is lighter in mass. And hence, when it enters the water, it creates new vacancy in water. Therefore, when it goes to point number C, when more oxygen produced from water, it can hold in the water, and hence higher oxidative power was recorded. And this is the evidence of lighter mass oxygen in the air, and it enters from the ambient air in the water, and this making the water appear new vacancies, and these new vacancies, when oxygen produced from water in the next cycle, it can continue to hold in the water and produce the water with higher oxidative power. So I conclude that oxygen made from water has higher mass because the oxygen comes from the ambient air, create more vacancy in the water for next magnetosynthesis process to take place. Consider when the oxygen is used to oxidize substance. So any single molecules of oxygen used to oxidize substance itself will be reduced, and 4 electronic energy will be released. However, when the oxygen has higher mass, when it used to oxidize other substance, it will produce higher oxidative energy. And this was the result we recorded. When the oxygen has higher mass, it will produce higher oxidative energy. And this finding, when we compare to Einstein's special relativity theory, which is E equal to mc squared, it obeys. Consider I have a nucleus, and when that nuclear mass is reduced, or we call it as the nucleus decay, gamma ray energy will be released. And this is its definition. In the other hand, if a substance or a nucleus absorb gamma ray energy, the nucleus mass will then be increased. Since the mass and energy follow the principle of conversion, so therefore we can conclude that mass and energy shall be interpermutable, and this is the Einstein's special relativity theory. So when we look at the diagram before, we see that there is gamma ray, then only the Einstein's special relativity theory can take place. But where is the gamma ray phases in the water? So the gamma ray can be produced when there is nucleus decay, and this is a very famous definition that all students in the secondary school they learn. So while there is gamma ray phases available everywhere in the atmosphere, scientists cannot explain, and I try to explain here. The secret is the hydrogen-electron pairs. So I present this secret in 3 pages and how the gamma ray flashes can be produced. Consider the ion of hydrogen, which is called the proton. And when electron is generated using the principle of induced current, electron will be attracted to the proton or the ion of hydrogen, or it is the nucleus of hydrogen. And before the electron collide with the proton, this is what happened. And why this can happen? Because massive amount of electron can be attracted to one single proton, because this is due to the mass ratio of proton and electron is 1,836 times, meaning that the size of the proton is 1,836 more bigger than a single particle of electron. Therefore, although the proton has only one positive charge and electron is one negative charge, however, before their collision, massive amount of electron is thought can be attracted by one single proton towards the surface of the one single proton. This can be made possible because the mass ratio of proton and electron is 1,836 times. This figure 1,836 times is a constant, and all people can find it everywhere in the Wikipedia or any textbook. However, when during the collisions in the page number 2, during the collision, we can see that all electrons adhere to the surface of a proton, and this proton is the nucleus of hydrogen. All must remember this is a nucleus. And when all the electrons adhere to the surface of the proton, however, because of the proton has just one positive charge and electron is one negative charge, therefore only one electron allowed to pair to proton. Other electrons will then be forced to be repelled away from the surface of the proton. So massive amount of electrons can now adhere to one single proton because of the mass ratios of proton and electron is 1,836 times. So in the next second after the collisions, only one electron is allowed. You see, only one electron is allowed to pair with the hydrogen. Only one single electron. The rest of the electron will be forced to repel away. So when electron is expelled away from the surface of the proton, there is mass reduction from the proton, or we call this as nucleus decay. So hence, when there is nucleus decay, gamma ray will be produced. So this method triggers gamma ray flashes productions. So when gamma ray flashes is produced, and when the gamma ray flashes shine on the oxygen that can be produced from the water, the mass of the oxygen increases. So this is the conclusion I make. So mass of oxygen made from magnetosynthesis is heavier compared to those average in the ambient air. It is more heavier. The oxidative power of the oxygen made from magnetosynthesis is indeed it is higher compared to those average in the ambient air. And this mass and energy obey the Einstein's special relativity theory. And when we want the Einstein's special relativity theory to be obeyed, available of gamma ray phases is the medium, or it is the tools where the Einstein's special relativity theory can be obeyed. So I provide a hypothesis where gamma ray phases in water is available during the magnetosynthesis because the proton is the nucleus of the hydrogen, and this nucleus of hydrogen is decayed during the hydrogen-electron pairs is formed. So this is my future work, and actually a lot of future work can be done using the new theory where gamma ray phases can be produced using the hydrogen-electron pairs. And I present only 2 examples in the future work. And actually a lot of experiments can be done for the benefit of the scientists in the present day. So example 1, I use the gamma ray phases to increase the calorie value of fuel oil made from tire pyrolysis. This is meaning that in the Malaysia industry, people use the waste tire or the used tire. They burn the used tire to get the oil. This process is called tire pyrolysis. So after they get the oil, we call this as fuel oil, and my company is using this kind of fuel oil as the fuel in my furnace. So I use it as it is to show this experiment that gamma ray phases is actually happen. So I tested, actually not myself, I instructed my chemist to do the experiment. And my chemist used the fuel oil, and she tested the original fuel oil added with 5% water. And she mixed well the fuel oil with 5% water. And then she tested using the atomic oxygen bomb calorific meter. She finds that the calorie value is 10,115 in that range. Okay, in that range. So bear in mind that not just oxygen, its mass can vary from small values to higher values, but also the carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, also their atomic masses are in range. So when this carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen, when these atoms are being shined by the gamma ray phases, then their mass will be increased. And when their masses are increased, I use the magnetosynthesis to show that when one cycle of the magnetosynthesis was done, the calorie value actually increased to about 1%. And this increment attributed to the gamma ray phases production. And when gamma ray produced, the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen atoms gain mass, and therefore the calorie value increased by about 1%. When my chemists continue the experiment to 2 cycles, the calorie value increase some more. It is in the range of 10,300. And for 3 cycles, the calorie value increase some more higher. This shows that the magnetosynthesis process working and gamma ray flashes is produced. When the gamma ray flashes shine on the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen, these atoms will gain mass and it will produce higher calorie value. So now I show example number 2. So in example number 2, we are able to increase the oxygen in mammalia tissue. So this production of oxygen in the mammalia tissue, it can happen at the site, meaning this is an in situ increment of oxygen in mammalia tissue. And how I did that, I show to you. So this example 2 is an example where treatment of hypoxia and anosmia disease can make possible. So what is hypoxia and anosmia disease? I explain here. So in the ambient air, it is about 21% oxygen available in the ambient air by volume. And in the healthy mammalia tissue, which is about 2% to 9% oxygen, meaning that in the case that in our human body, if everywhere of our tissues are 2% to 9%, and we are healthy. But however, if our tissue has less than 2%, this is called the phenomenon of hypoxia, and the tissue is called hypoxia tissues, and which is below 2% oxygen. And however, when any mammalia tissues has below 0.02% oxygen, which is called anosmia phenomenon, and it is called anosmia tissues. And this conclusion made not by myself, and I just copy from the available medical facts. And these papers you can read, which is published by Bertoy et al. The name is The Impact of Oxygen Availability on Human Cancer. And the hypoxia disease include but not limited to stroke, tissue ischemia. Tissue ischemia means tissue below 2% oxygen. Inflammation, growth of solid tumors, heart attack, and so on and so on. And the anosmia tissues, anosmia disease is the growth of cancer cells, meaning that when there is a growth of solid tumors at the hypoxia level, the hypoxia tumors will change to become anosmia tumors, which is the cancer cells. And even after the patient has done surgery and removed the cancer cell and continue to radiography, and after some time, perhaps there is tumor of cancer recurrence. And scientists found that when tumor recurrence happens, the tissues are all below 0.02% oxygen. Hence, if my experiment is working, I can make the oxygen produced in situ in the mammalia tissues, because the mammalia tissues has aqueous water. When the magnetic field shine on the mammalia tissues, in situ increment of oxygen can make possible. So now I present my customer. He is Mr. Lee Peng Cheng. His Malaysian identity card number is 5707 and blah blah blah. So Mr. Lee has the early eyes cancer and he also has glaucoma. But Mr. Lee refused to seek the Western medical method to treat his eyes. And one day, it was about 3 years ago, and he used my method free of charge. And today, Mr. Lee eye cancer and glaucoma almost cured, and he returned to good eyesight. Before that, he was blind, and he returned to good eyesight after magnetosynthesis process. And please contact myself in case anybody has hypoxia or anosmia disease, and I will give the materials for free, consultation for free. And please email me. I will respond. Thank you very much to listen to my presentation.
It was a very good presentation.
Thank you.